Good morning. Good morning. My name is Gloria Steinem. I'm going to speak briefly and then disappear because we have the voices of experience and expertise here. I thank each of the reporters who's come to listen and to question, and I especially thank the activists and leaders from Syria, Libya, and Yemen who have come such a long distance to be with us. The moderator is going to be Hibak Osman from Karama, which is, as you know, a growing movement, now 8 countries in North Africa and the Middle East. And the question and answer period will be open to you. As we know, even in a general way, studies show that decision-making groups that are all male tend to choose the most aggressive solution, and decision-making groups that are all female tend to choose the most conciliatory one. Thus, we are way, way more likely to have the full range of options, to pick the one that is most right for a particular situation, whether in business or in foreign policy or in peace talks, when a group is representative of the population by being equally female and male. But when it comes to peace talks, women have a special stake. Women and children worldwide are 90% of the refugees. Women suffer more from violence, especially the sexualized violence that now characterizes conflict. And violence against females is an indicator, as it turns out, of all other violence. I recommend to you a book called Sex and World Peace by Valerie Hudson and other scholars, which demonstrates in every current country that the biggest indicator of whether there will be violence inside the country or that country will be willing to use military violence against another country is not poverty, not access to natural resources, not religion or even degree of democracy. It's violence against females, because that is what we tend to see first, gives us the idea that one group is born to dominate the other, and then normalizes all other forms of domination. Indeed, there is so much violence against females now on this spaceship Earth that for the first time there are actually fewer females than males. We don't believe that that has ever happened before. We have struggled to have the mechanism to make this happen. You all know about Security Council Resolution 1325. And I want to say once again how crucial the role of the media is in showing us the possibilities that are not yet present at the peace table. And we should remember that, for instance, in Ireland and Liberia, those were cases of women making peace when governments couldn't. Now, if they could make such a difference outside the room and away from the peace table, imagine what women could do in the room and at the table if we were half of every group. Now, Hibak, would you take over as moderator? Thank you.
It's a pleasure to take over from Gloria Steinem. Good morning, and thank you very much for being part of this press conference and coming to hear this incredible woman speak. Our first speaker is going to be Muna Ghanem. Muna Ghanem is in Geneva, participating in the Geneva talks. 1325, I will pick up where Gloria left. 1325 has 5 important parts: participation, protection of women. Participation meant that women throughout, the whole reason why 1325 came was so that women will participate in the peace negotiations. What we are seeing after years of fighting, I think it came out in 2000. So after years of fighting for women to participate in the peace negotiations, what we ended up and what is an appointment of woman advisory for Syria, for example. The woman advisory is to advise Mistura. So what we really were fighting for was this woman to go inside in the peace negotiations. Because as a matter of fact, women are the inspiration and the passion and the ones who are working with the communities that are going through the war. So the real story is with women. So the reason we want is not just because women should really be there, but we want women to be there because women are working with the communities and they are the ones who know exactly what's happening, and they are the ones who know the effects of war on the society. So women's participation is not just a political soundbite, which we really ended up with. Women's participation is the core of peace, democracy, human rights, and justice. Because if you leave women behind and they don't participate, then you are leaving behind the society itself. So when we asked and fought for women, what we got was women advisory to Mastura, and which means women are not inside the table or inside the room, they are still at the corridors. So it's like, okay, you wanted women to participate, we got you women advising the envoy. Should they be advising the envoy or actually be the ones inside? I mean, there is really something wrong. So again, we are looking at UN that is unable, or their inability to push and enforce and implement their own resolutions. The same reason that we don't see enough women or women peace envoys. The only one that we remember is Mary Robinson. In a region that all hell seems to be breaking loose in the Middle East, you don't even have a woman envoy, peace envoy. So again, we are looking at the politics and the men in suits inside the rooms negotiating who is going to take a position, who really are leaving behind the real community. When you look at, for example, in Syria and in other places, and of course Libya and Yemen, my sisters would add to that, and Muna will give us specific examples. You really don't see the people who matter and who are suffering from the war and fleeing on boats, their stories or their situations being discussed. So Muna doesn't need too much introduction. Muna is the head of, she is a politician, she's an activist, she's an incredible woman, but she's the head of the Syrian Women's Platform for Peace, and now the advisory, shall we say, the advisory, yes, the Women's Advisory to Mastura. Muna, go ahead. Okay, Muna, we can hear you. 1 second. Muna, لحظة. Muna. استني يا منى.
Yes, now. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Good morning. Thank you very much, Hibak, for the introduction. It's very unfortunate that I'm not with you in person due to some problems with my traveling documents. Hopefully, this conference I will be able to bring my ideas. As Hibak mentioned, that now we have the woman at the Women Advisory Board to Mr. de Mistura, the UN Special Envoy, and this is the first time where a Special Envoy has his own board of Women Advisory. And the Advisory Board is a reflection for the UN commitment to the women agenda, and this is only the first step, and I will seize this opportunity to thank Karama and Donor Direct Action for their support for our movement during the last 5 years in bringing our voice to the international community. But this advisory board for myself is only the first step. This is not what we are aspiring for. And what we are aspiring for is not only participation. We are aspiring to be the decision makers. And we have a long way to go. I mean, there is some women in the opposition and the regime delegations, but they are not in the leadership of this delegation. They are not even seen in the media. And we have been lobbying with both delegations to have to include more women and to give them the leadership. So it's the problem in Syrian case. It's not with the UN, and I know that the UN is very much committed and they have their own tools and mechanism to integrate women in the peace process. It's with the Syrian men who are doing negotiation for peace. And this will take me to a little bit to brief on what is happening in Geneva, and I will link it to the women agenda. First of all, I mean, the ceasefire has given the opportunity for a political process. And now those who were armed are not as important as they used before the ceasefire. And their weight in the Syrian society are not as much as the women weight in the Syrian society. So the big question now is, why are they making the future of Syria? Why are not women are also making the future of Syria? Are we going to let those who destroyed Syria and committed a huge human rights violation for women and children, destroyed the country infrastructure, created with their actions the horrible ACEs? Are we going to let them design the future of Syria? Are we going to let them build the nation of Syria? Are we going, and this is the most important question, are we going to let them draft the constitution of Syria?
Thank you,
Those
Mona.
people who are those.
So we will come back to this specific discussions, and I think we have only 30 minutes, so I will go to Yemen.
Okay.
We'll come back to the discussion. Thank you, Mona.
Okay.
I am an activist, women working on women issues. I want to give you first a brief description about what is going on in Yemen first, so to know the background, and I'm going to talk about the consequences of the current situation on women and the current conflict on women and in their situation. As you may know, Yemen was one of the Arab Spring countries. A revolution started in February 2011, and it was very unique in the history of Yemen for two reasons. First, for the very civilian and peaceful nature of that revolution. Maybe for the first time in Yemen, it is a peaceful revolution. And the very important reason was the participation of the civilian components like women and youth. That was also for the very first time happening in Yemen, that women are becoming a change maker in Yemen. So maybe you have also heard about Tawakkol Kerman, who won the Nobel Prize on honoring Arabic and women efforts in changing their societies. So at the same year, like a deal happened between the opposition and the vice president and the president Ali Abdullah Saleh. So they came up with something initiative, and part of that initiative to change the whole regime in Yemen. So Ali Saleh, the president, stepped down, and we had another new president in Yemen, and we started something called the National Dialogue Conference. The National Dialogue Conference was very important step in the history of Yemeni women, and it was for the first time the Yemeni women are 30% of the decision-making processes in Yemen on the public policy drawing in Yemen. So we were around 30%, 27 to 30% in that conference, women and youth too, and I was fortunate to be one of the members of that conference. The 565 people who were in that conference divided into 9 groups. Women could be the head of 3 of these groups. Very important groups were the Freedom and Human Rights group, the Good Governance group, and the Sa'da group. This is a city in Yemen. It has a specific issue, and it was this one. This group was very important because very tribal city, and nobody really believed that a woman could lead that group. So that was really amazing and good step, positive step in the Yemeni women history. After that, the conference ended with something called the National Dialogue Conference Outcome Document, and that document was very progressive when it comes to women issues, when it comes to children's rights, human rights, and women really could make a change, and they brought the needs of the real people to the table. They were not only negotiating in that process or that political forum only the ideas of who will rule and how will they rule. They were also talking about the human rights, about the justice, about the infrastructure, about the special needs of women, and then in the end they could have an end to the early marriage in Yemen. They could achieve that because of that participation. They could talk about human rights for the first time in the Yemeni constitution. That will happen later. And they could conclude that the human of Yemen is the first thing to discuss when it comes to politics, not who will rule or how will rule. After that, After that, the Constitution Drafting Committee also, for the first time, composed of 17 persons. 4 of them were women, and that also for the first time. That was in the 2013, in the March of 2013. After that, another committee established in Yemen called the National Body for Observing the Implementation of National Dialogue Outcomes, and that also representation of women was really highly represented, the women there. But I want to talk now about the current situation, if you can give me 2 minutes. But now, after the conflict in Yemen started, after the coup led by Ali Saleh and Houthis militia, and then the Saudi interference, now we cannot, the Yemeni women status is really degraded. We cannot be part anymore of the political or the peace negotiation, not a political negotiation. In Geneva, when there was no one woman in the negotiation, but Geneva too, we could have one woman, and with more enforce from the internal or the local actors and the UN and international community, I think we could achieve more and continue the achievements of the Yemeni women.
Thank you very much. Our third speaker is Sarah Langi from Libya, again an activist in Libya.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Karama. Thank you, Donor Act. Thank you, Gloria, for being here with us. Thank you for all of you. Well, I will not brief you because evidently Libya is in a big mess. Though we had great hopes back 5 years back in 2011. There were appealing titles and doctrines like the responsibility to protect, which then looked like more of regime change. And there will still be more of interventions creating more chaos in Libya and not learning from the previous lessons of having a comprehensive political strategy with whatever military intervention there is. The cases of Libya and Yemen, Syria, we see that there is this concept of intervention. There is this UN lightfoot, moderate political mission, but it's not doing that much to help Libyans, to help civilians, which was the whole idea was to protect the civilians, the local communities. I was part of the UN-led formal peace process, but I did not attend. I boycotted the final signing of the agreement. The agreement. So it's actually, it's not only about women's representation and they're invited to the table, because sometimes women's representation could be manipulated. And this is exactly the case of Libya. A few women were invited, but then what exactly did they bring to the table? So at a certain point, they were sidelined. Members of political parties who were who had alliances with militias, they had the final say. Articles that were related to ending impunity were removed. So it ended up, we ended up with an agreement that it's about power sharing. And in order to have sustainable peace in Libya, you need more than a ceasefire and power sharing. We need to have a clear plan of demilitarization and disarmament, rehabilitation of armed groups. We need to have transitional justice. We need to have local reconciliation. conditions. At the moment, I've boycotted all of this. I'm all the track of vertical reconciliations, peace of what I call negative peace, peace of gentlemen with ties who only care about how they share the power among them, and not positive peace that engages local communities and specifically women and youth. So now we are working on the horizontal local reconciliations to build our own peace. That is the peace that will last. That will be sustainable peace. And so if we don't have a place around the table, the formal peace, we will create our own space. And as we see now, the peace is very fragile, and so we cannot count on the UN-led formal process. And so I call on the international community, which is basically any different conflicting political conflicting states with different interests, to invest in local communities, to invest in the non-state actors, and not to tie every kind of humanitarian aid with the weak national government that has not been born yet. Today, this morning, there was a statement by the Security Council to support the National Accord government that has legal problems in its the vote of confidence. This government is only supported to give a rubber stamp for a kind of a military intervention to counter terrorism and to counter the issue of illegal migration. These are not the issues that Libya needs at the moment. We need to work on DDR, to work on transitional justice. These are the issues that we need, and we can empower the local communities, specifically women, in order to achieve that kind of sustainable peace. Thank you.
So if we look at all the three countries, I think, people are coming to the terms that the failures of the UN-led reconciliations are not working very well. And since the world is talking about the sustainable development goals, there's not going to be any development without peace, and there's not going to be peace without development. And the only way to reconcile these two ideas is to work with the community. So we have to find our own space, work with our own communities, and see what's possible. The floor is yours now. It's open to the journalists, please. Just your name and who you are, please.
Yes. Anna Nazloyan, I am from Aylur AM on behalf of Armenia. I wanted to thank all the organizers of this very important briefing, but first of all, wanted to say hats off to always beautiful, brilliant, forever young and energetic Gloria Steinem, who has been inspiring generations of women and young girls all over the world, and who helped us be stronger, stand up for ourselves, and look beyond our gender and any prejudice that we're subjected in today's world. So eternal thank you to you, Gloria. You are my personal hero as well.
Agree.
And as in terms of women issues in today's world, it pains me that we still have these issues, that we are having this briefing, that we are discussing it. It's a bittersweet situation. On one hand, it's very important to discuss this, but on the other hand, that in 21st century we still have these issues is very, unfair. So I hope for the world, and I'm championing and bargaining and waiting and fighting for the world where these issues are obsolete, non-existent. They do not exist anymore, and we don't have to discuss them. So we have to, even if needed, fight for that, no matter what. And I have little questions for all the participants pertaining to their specific countries that they represent. For Yemen, I can't but ask about child marriages, which is like painful, horrific, heartbreaking, where girls as young as 12, 10, 9, 8 are being forcefully married and sometimes end up in suicide or death in childbirth or many other things, unspeakable things. What is being done by Yemen government is anything being done on this issue, and what kind of expectations and demands even do you have from UN on this specific topic, which is very painful. On Syria, I can't but ask about the refugee situation, because refugees are twice, like doubly vulnerable. Being a woman in a Middle East society is very difficult, but being a refugee woman is like doubly difficult. So what's the situation in refugee camps, and what can you say to us about sex trafficking, because we know it's been going on and sometimes we don't know the whole truth. And as for Libya, it's very important. I wanted to specify it because it turns out that NATO and Western powers sort of like toppled the government, and we won whatever we were aiming to win there. But the situation has gotten worse by many experts. They say that it's worse than it was during the Gaddafi period. Well, for example, a man couldn't take a second wife, and women can easily attend campuses and universities. And now we've learned that, for example, in southern city of Derna, a wall is being built in between the campus to separate the boys and the girls, which is like completely ridiculous. What is being done in Libya? And to all of you, what kind of expectations and demands do you have from international community and UN specifically to, improve the situation? Thank you very much.
Questions, one at a time, but short. Actually, answer that one.
You ask about the early marriage, but my answer that early marriage or child marriage, it doesn't come alone. It comes with a whole package of poverty, illiteracy, and all lacking of opportunities, other opportunities for the girls and also boys for in Yemen. Not only girls, but we always focus on girls because they have then early pregnancy and ability to die. They can die because of that. So the government. I will not say the government. I will talk about the the draft of the new constitution, and also about the conference dialogue. What I was talking about, that they could achieve an article that said it's not allowed or it's prohibited to get married before 18. But now, because Yemen in war, we have to start again to restore the political process. We continue the political process, so then we can implement all these kind of agreements and articles.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't want to take long, Yani, but I don't want to sound that I'm against fully the doctrine of the responsibility to protect. I think in some cases, you need to have an intervention. But how? What kind of intervention? What do you do? How you have a full, comprehensive strategy, political strategy, what to do when you intervene, what kind of intervention, not necessarily militarily. So what we have today, what we face today is the Gaddafi's legacy, actually. The other thing is, I think, what women are facing today, it's greater than only having a segregation between men and women in colleges. And I think what we are facing today, these issues have issues that are related to women's rights, issues that in certain parts of the world we discuss and take for granted as the issues of women's rights, are not issues to some societies when the right to move, the right to live, you don't have. And that's because of arms. This is the issue that we need, the root cause, militarizations, the arms anarchy. That's the core of why women, after being at the forefront of the revolution, they are now not even traveling to attend capacity building of workshops. That's exactly the root cause. So we cannot only focus on women's issues. We need to have a holistic approach to address the root causes. And the root causes is arms. Why the international community has not done anything to work on DDR, on disarmament, rehabilitation. That's what Libya needed back then and needs now.
Thank you.
Just a little follow-up. When after the
could you excuse me? Please, can you give Mona a chance to answer, because we have such a short time.
About Libya, when after the intervention it gets worse, you begin to question the intervention.
I'm really sorry, we don't have enough time. Mona, go ahead if you want to answer. We'll come back to it, inshallah. Mona, can you take the Syria questions, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I think this is a very valid question asking about the refugee. And let's remember the latest photo which was released from one of the camps on the Greek boundaries where women give birth to a child, and there was no even enough water to clean the newborn child. Women in the refugee camps, they suffer from usual suffering, poverty, and being the breadwinner, and there is no man with them. But I will use this question just to target the international community policy toward Syrian refugee, where they only, the international community was only interested in giving them what I call it painkiller, and not solving the question, the problems which bring these people to be a refugee, and also just give them food and not even enough food, and not to care about their other needs, like to work, like to develop themselves, like to go to school. So I will question a lot, very much the international policy toward the humanitarian policy is in Syria, and I think what this international policy didn't help the Syrian refugee to continue their life, and they will not be able also when they go back to the country to be productive to their country. Again, I will join Zahra to say that before we have this painkiller for refugee or for the woman, we should ask what is the diseases, and diseases is distributing arms to all these groups who are fighting in Syria. And even after resolution 2254, the countries continue to give armed group army to fight in Syria.
Thank you, Mona.
Thank you. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. And also weighing in, thank you to Gloria and thank you to Sue. We miss you here at the UN. And to all the panelists. So my question is for Mona, just specifically on Syria, on the De Mistura peace talks. Could you talk to the fact, what is it that you want out of the peace talks since they're up and running? And what would a woman want different than a man, since you made the point? Thank you.
Clearly, we want peace in Syria, but it's not only peace, not only ceasefire. We want a democratic country where human rights are protected. And this is why I questioned the issue of constitution drafting and who is drafting this constitution. What we want as a women movement to have the women agenda on the table, not only women, because we know that some women really don't carry with them the women agenda. We want a women agenda. I think it is clear for us as a women movement that there is no democracy without women involvement and without women rights. And this is why we are pushing towards more women activists to be on the table. I know that there is other women, and some of them are women activists, but not enough women activists and women who are carrying the women agenda are on the peace talk for Syria. What women need different from men, I think, first of all, not enough men in Syria, at least from the people who are negotiating in Geneva, wants peace, while all the Syrian women want peace. So I think what we want also, we want a country which will protect and respect women under the citizenship issues and concepts.
Thank you, Mona.
Yes, Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press, and this question is for any of you. You talked about the underlying causes. Wouldn't that be in part attributable to the very deeply ingrained patriarchal cultural norms in the Middle East and in Africa? And are you? What would you like to see coming out of the UN during this meeting relating to women's rights, challenging directly those patriarchal norms? And are you disappointed with the lack of attention given by feminists in the West on the problems of women in the Middle East, with some exceptions like Ms. Dynamo? But there are quite a number of feminists in the West who have either made excuses or have ignored the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a good question. And since you raised it, I think I'll go for it. I think, yeah, it's patriarchy, but it's patriarchal norms not only in the Middle East and Africa. it's universal patriarchal norms. And the special envoy, the formal special envoy, Bernardino Leon, if you remember his last photo, having a woman next to him and a minority, one Tawarik, and acting as an Orientalist coming to rescue the women and the minorities, and his, the Leon Gates and the lack of transparency and how he dealt with all the issues and how he mediated this dialogue one-to-one. There was no Libyan dialogue. It was actually each party was having their own dialogue with Mr. Leon. That's the kind of patriarchy we need to fight, and that's the kind of patriarchal norms we need to combat. And yes, we need to revolutionize the feminist, white feminist bourgeois discourse, definitely. Yeah, I agree on that.
The other thing is, I think we are more political than the many feminists in the West, by the way, and we certainly are not waiting for anyone to liberate ourselves, to liberate us from ourselves. As a matter of fact, we want to liberate them. They look at burqa, and we do feel strongly that there are, many people in the West are working the political, cultural burqa themselves, but they don't see it. It's invisible, and they obsess on what you are wearing, what you are saying, your religion, and all of that. And let's not forget, this is being manipulated by people who are absolutely have a phobia and the culture and the religion and in the Middle East. So we can talk about it. This is more complicated than just giving you a black and a white answer. But you do have, I think Hillary Clinton is being attacked many times because she's a woman. So you cannot say just there is only one part that maybe the Middle East or Africa is more has a more patriarchal culture than in other places. So we can really talk. And the fact that there is no ERA, in the West and all this. I mean, what examples do you really have to go? And the woman's right to her body is still being questioned. I mean, really, can we talk? Seriously, so you do have a lot. I think charity starts at home. Clean your own house and don't talk about the Middle East.
Thanks for this talk, and I hope there will be other discussions, more discussions like this in the future. I have two questions. One for Zahra in Libya. You talked about alternative. My name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper, Arabic newspaper based in London. I'm their correspondent in New York. You talked about an alternative way that you are taking now since the international community failed you. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? And a very short question also to Sahar from Yemen. You said that you were at the beginning and different process involved and other women, but now on the negotiation table, there's hardly any women. Can you tell us more regarding this, about the UN role in this, and when you go and talk about it, which closed doors you face, or whom to blame, if we can say this? Thank you very much.
The situation of Yemen now is not that stable. I mean, the UN intervention now is not as before. The government is in Saudi Arabia, and we have Houthis and Ali Saleh militia in Sana'a. So all the focus of the UN, how to bring these two parties to one table and to discuss. They sacrifice having more women or more, civil components in that, in the favor of bringing these two parties in one table, because they refused in the beginning to even negotiate about the peace. It was only the word only mean to them. So I think that the new envoy need to push more, to have more women. In the beginning, there was no women at all in the negotiation, but now we have one after an push from him. I know that personally, and I think for the next times he can do much more and from the early beginning to have more women on the table and discussing the peace and how to restore the old or where the political process stopped before.
I will have to say something the opposite to what my colleagues just said. After being part of Mr. Bernardino's, the patriarch, peace process, I think, and seeing how he patronized the whole process, I think we need a revolutionary feminist way of how to see peace processes. We have to create our own space. And it's not only we want the Mr. Special Envoy to invite one or two who happen to speak English or who happen to have followers on social media or whatever criteria they have in mind, but we will create our own table, our own process. That's the informal. The informal is all about the real people. So that will be the alternative way. And that's what we are doing at the moment. It's investing in local communities, investing in non-state actors. By the way, and it's not that I have something totally against the UN. There are people who are from the UN who are focused on human rights. And I believe women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. So our agenda, women's agenda, for the peace is centered around the idea of justice and human rights. That's the place that we will create. So that's what we're working on, and it's bottom up. It's not something from the top.
Okay. Mona, would you like to say something?
No.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Dulcie Leinbach from Paz Blue. I have two questions, one for Mona and one for the Libyan activist. Mona, why is there still a barrier for the Syrian envoy's team putting you actually at the table, given that there are women on the opposition side? Why aren't you at the table? What's the problem? And how are you going to be working with the women on the one side of the table? I mean, how will that work, logistically? And then the Libyan activist, Martin Kobler says he's tried to get women more involved, but the people he's dealing with have rejected his suggestions. So what do you think Martin Kobler's doing enough, and how can he do more? Thanks.
Question, please.
Okay. What prevents me to be on the table, I think because I carry women agenda. I was part of Riyadh meeting. I was behind with other colleagues behind establishing a women advisory board for the opposition, but I was not there because I carry women agenda. I push for it. I put it on of my political priority. What prevents the UN Special Envoy to put women activists or women agenda on the table is the culture and the mindset of the men who are there. And this is why we are pushing and lobbying to make it a round-table negotiation rather than two parties negotiation. We strongly believe that including only opposition and the regime in the negotiation will not bring the best interests of the Syrian people, especially the women. So this is what we are lobbying for. Of course, we are working and connecting and cooperating with the other women on the opposition, and we are trying also to open doors with the women in the regime delegation, because I think what is needed in Syria to put the women agenda above all the political classification. I think we should really link Syria future to women agenda regardless of what is your political position at this moment.
Thank you. Just to add to Muna's what Mona just said, yesterday we saw Ban Ki-moon, the General Secretary, and we asked him, three things. One of it was that 1325 is there, and that the UN is not implementing it the way it's supposed to, and we need it to be implemented. So women should not be at the corridor, but actually at the table. And we know the opposition or the government is not going to appoint women, and if they appoint women, they will bring women that look like women, but there is nothing about women about them because they don't have a womanist agenda, like Mona said. So in that case, we said we need a quota, and we're lobbying, to have a quota for women and civil society, because these are the people who, if we are going to influence, the peace document and the peace negotiation, then somebody has to be there who understands what the people are going through. So it could be a people's agenda, not just boys who really want to negotiate their positions. And if you look at the outcomes, you'll always find the fight is about who's going to be in what position many times, really. And many of them are so detached that they really haven't been back into the countries, and very detached from their own societies, and they call opposition. And let's not forget also the role that the international community, somebody said, what do you want the international community to do? Sometimes you really don't want them to do much other than listening to the people, actually. So the international community have their own, they have their own agenda. Well.
They ask. I just.
Yeah, and Jessica. I don't know that, but go ahead. We'll take.
Yeah, my question is, we had at least 5 or 7 UN envoys that were for different countries: Libya, Syria, Yemen, etc. They were appointed by Mr. Ban Ki-moon. What do you think? And they are all men. Where do you think his role in this issue?
I don't think he has really met any woman. He keeps appointing men. What do you answer?
Can I say something, Hibak?
Yes.
Hibak.
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes,
here?
please. Yes. Yes.
I think now in the Syrian case, I think Mr. de Mistura is trying his best to really bring the women agenda on the table by setting an example of this women advisory group. I think this is what he can do. But the role which was given to us by discussing every single step of the negotiation and putting our ideas, I think it's a very good start. And maybe next time we will have a woman special envoy for peace process, and we hope there will be no more war in any other countries. But what I'm seeing now in Geneva, that he is trying to construct the peace process so that the woman could lead Syria in the future. And this is a very good step. Of course, we should continue to lobby and to put pressure on the opposition and the regime to give women leading role, but what is important is how we construct the new Syria. And this is why the UN, I think they are working toward this ultimate goal.
That's it.
Can I answer the question on Martin Kugler?
Let's just go ahead until you're kicked out.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to answer the question on Kugler, if he's doing much for the Libyan women. I don't think that he's doing that much. He's actually following his predecessor. And actually what the former special envoy did, he had a special track, a segregated track, if you will, for women. So they will have their own dialogue. And then when they say how many women you had, he will tick the box. And he said, we had these women in their special segregated track. So this is how they're manipulating the quantitative representation of women in peace processes. We need to revolutionize peace-building processes. We had 2 reviews, one on peace process architecture and the other on women, peace and security, and not much has been done. It is a historic moment that we need to bring more revolutionary ideas to the patriarchal world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.